Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 1, Episode 1, Second Contact. So this video is the first in a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Lower Decks up to the very first episode. If you haven't seen this, you will not want to watch this video. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So, let me first get into some of my feelings about Lower Decks, my anticipation of it, my thoughts of it before I watched the show. I was actually pretty excited for this show because the more I hear about it, the more I heard that it's kind of going to be really different than what we know of as modern Trek, and that it's the brainchild of Mike McMahon, who is most known for working on Rick and Morty, the first couple of seasons, which are the most revered seasons. And he was talking about how he always wanted to do a Star Trek show. He always wanted to write a Star Trek episode. But, of course, he was like just a little kid or a teenager when Next Generation Deep Space Nine was airing, so he couldn't submit a spec script. And by the time he was a bona fide script writer, it was during the dark ages in between Enterprise and Discovery, and so he had nothing to write for, and that's when he really always wanted to write Star Trek. And apparently he had a friend who became a producer over at Secret Hideout, of course, Alex Kurtzman's thingy that's running Star Trek, and he suggested them, why don't you come in and have a pitch meeting? And so he came up with this idea for doing the Lower Decks, and he always talked about how he apparently had this Twitter series where he wrote this fictional Next Generation Season 8, which was a bit more comedic and a lot of people were fans of, so he was known for that. And so he came in and pitched the idea of Lower Decks, which he was inspired by the episode Lower Decks. He said that although that episode was a lot more serious, but he wanted to do something a bit more comedic. But he said that he wanted to keep it true to the feel of Next Generation because basically there was a lot of the character moments and the sort of more comedic character moments that are usually B plots within episodes of Next Generation is what really inspired him and what he latched on to. So he didn't actually think his pitch would work because he was pitching the more lighthearted character moments sort of thing, but of course they went for it. Now, giving my rough feelings on the show after watching it, first of all, this is just the first episode, so I am hoping that the show will improve from here, because sometimes the first episode is just not all that great and you have to ease into it. I do see a lot of potential here. Now, I'm sure a lot of the haters who just make their money off of saying how modern Trek is terrible at all costs, even though I don't think they actually care, many of these people. I think they just do it because they know that's the way to rake in the views. But anyway, I know they're going to trash this show regardless. I mean, it could end up being the best thing Trek ever happened to Trek, and they'd still trash it. It doesn't matter. But I do think, though, that those who compare this to Picard and Discovery are off base, personally. Just based off the first episode, maybe because I don't get that modern Trek feel like Picard, Discovery, or the reboots. I do get more of a classic 90s TNG vibe from this episode than I do get a modern feel. Now, it is unique, has its in an animated comedy, so it also is very reminiscent of not just Rick and Morty. I know a lot of people jump straight to Rick and Morty because the writer who, showrunner was a writer on Rick and Morty, but a lot of modern animated comedy, sci-fi like Futurama came to mind, or Final Space. I thought it was actually very reminiscent of that as well. And just other animated comedy stuff like Family Guy and stuff came to mind as well. So it has that animated comedy, adult animated comedy feel to it, combined with a TNG feel, which is what I expected from this show. And so it doesn't at all, I think, honestly, I would compare it a lot more to the Orville more than I would to Discovery or Picard, which I know no one's going to do because all the said haters I referred to idolize the Orville as the greatest thing that ever happened to Star Trek, even though it's not fucking Star Trek. So yeah, but especially that opening theme did remind me of a lot of the Orville. Now, I don't think the show is like trying to copy the Orville. They're just kind of both shows are kind of trying to do the same thing. They want to do a lighthearted comedy version of Star Trek that is more episodic and more the spirit of TNG. So they're both trying to do the same thing, but they're going about it in different ways. So I understand that mileage may vary, that some people will much prefer the Orville over this, but me, I'd probably be more likely to lean towards preferring Lower Decks. But again, it depends on if the show gets better, how it goes from here. Because, you know, I already talked about the Orville on my channel. I have my issues with that, particularly season 2. It just lost me. But as far as Lower Decks, it's yet to grab me. But as I said, it's one episode. So it's not fair to be like, oh, the season sucks. It's just one episode. And I could see off of this one episode how it has the groundwork for good shows there. Like, they did a good job of introducing these characters. It has an interesting setup. It's very obvious that the show is really good at world building, of setting the stage for developing a realistic world that you want to jump into. The question is what they're going to do with it. Now, as for this first episode itself, I've heard the complaint that it was too, fast-paced. It was too kinetic. Like, it didn't really give you time to digest the plot, and the dialogue was just really, really jumpy. It's like, oh, how's it going? Did you want the Kirk? Oh yeah, don't be silly, blah blah blah. And it has that really fast, kinetic feel, which is, you know, that is common in some. This is what I was saying, how it has like an animated comedy feel to it, because that is common. Particularly, I just watched the first episode of BoJack Horseman. It was also kind of like that, and that's also criticized as not a very good episode, and that show got way, way better as well. But that first episode also came off as very boom, 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 just joke after joke, kinetic energy. So I'm hoping it's going to be the same sort of thing here, where this show is going to calm down a bit once it sort of develops its story and eases into it a bit more. But that being said, I actually did enjoy this episode. I must admit, it's a comedy, and I didn't laugh out loud, which I have done. Like, as I said, I was just watching BoJack Horseman season 4, and I was laughing hysterically some parts. Where here, I didn't really laugh, but I still found it amusing. Just because I didn't laugh doesn't mean I didn't find it amusing. There were some things I liked about it, and I was kind of getting into some of the characterizations. I think the thing that I liked the most about this episode was how they had this storyline about, you know, the crew getting infected with a virus, where they all turned into, like, you know, evil zombies, and they started, you know, vomiting up black shit on people and infecting other people and, like, biting them, and the whole crew was going around shooting them. I like that, because here's the thing. That kind of thing is something we've seen, not just on Star Trek, but many other sci-fi shows. It's a very tired old plot. In fact, it was kind of reminiscent of The Walking Dead in some sense, and just the zombie genre. But it reminded me of, like, the Enterprise episode Impulse, or maybe the Next Generation episode Genesis. That kind of sort of where the crew's gets infected and they start attacking the other crew. But what I liked about this is the way that the show handled it is that they did not give it importance. It didn't feel like it was the A plot, and in fact, many of the characters were very nonchalant about this happening, and the show itself kind of treated it like it was just a normal thing, and who cares? And I like that. I've heard one reviewer already complain about that, but actually I love that aspect of it, because if they did play it seriously and play it as the main plot, as the main threat, then it would be boring and cliche, because this is something that's been done like a billion times before. But that's the point of the show, is not the big threat. It's just there to sort of pay homage to Star Trek and to sort of, in a kind of fourth wall breaking way, sort of poke fun at Star Trek. To be like, oh, because this is the kind of plot you would typically have in Star Trek where the zombies go raw, but here we see how people who are like the lower deck types and not really affected by it don't really care or just see it as a normal thing. And I like that. In particular, I believe his name's Ensign Rutherford, how he went on a date with this Trill. I think she's the helmsman, but he went on a date with this Trill woman, and the date was going really well, and they were really connecting. And then the zombie stuff breaks out all around them, and they were still like talking as if they're still on a date. It's like, oh, what kind of music are you into? And while there's people going around, all around them going, and everyone's finding phases and crazy. I like that. I think that kind of comedy really worked for me, and it put this whole like tired cliche storyline that, as I said, just seen tons of times before in Star Trek, in a totally new perspective, which made it fresh, which made it work for me. And so I particularly liked that, and particularly how they went out, like they were walking in the spacesuits and they were still being nonchalant, and then when they got in and they had, going through all this, all the, this horror and adventure, and so she got excited about it and kissed him, but he was still hung up about like how I don't know, some sort of diagnostic or something, just showing like where his priorities lie. And then at the end of the episode, oh god, I'm gonna look up her name, the green woman, who I believe they're saying that she's an Orion, Ensign Tindy, where she was talking to Rutherford and and he was like asking how the date went. She's like, I don't think we're going to see each other anymore, because she was this diagnostic and she wasn't really interested in it. And she pauses. You think she's going to say like, what the fuck is your problem? Why are you so worried about a diagnostic? But instead she totally agrees with him. It's like, I know, that's crazy. How could you not care about this diagnostic? Which does show, it's a great way of portraying where these type of characters they are and where their priorities lie, plus being really good comedy at the same time. So I do think that was my favorite aspect of this episode. Now the stuff with the main characters, Ensign Mariner and Ensign Bulmer, I thought was fine. I think the opening scene with her being drunk, like I thought that was funny, but the problem is I thought that was funny a week ago when I saw the clip, the preview. They showed the whole thing. So when I watched this episode, it's like I was watching the episode for a third time. It's like I've already seen this a couple times, so it made it harder for me to get into it. But I do think that was a particular funny clip. But here's the thing I think that might be off-putting to some people, is that Ensign Mariner is a little bit over the top, which sometimes works for me and sometimes doesn't. I mean, as I said, sometimes I think she's really funny, and I think the chemistry these two characters have is really good, and the quirky dialogue that she has is really good. Although, as I said, the kinetic way too fast might be too much for some people, which I can see. So I hope they do slow things down with her a little bit, because she does seem extremely hyperactive, and which is good. That's part of her character, but I think maybe they just need to dial it back just a little bit. And the Ensign Bulmer, I don't know. I guess they didn't do a good job of getting this character across, but I just think some of the jokes, particularly with him having being caught in that spider's mouth and having to sit there, I knew they were going to have us do him for hours, and I thought that was stupid. I didn't find that funny. But the one thing I really, really didn't like is that, and this was what kind of reminded me of something I didn't like about the Orville, is that with the reveal at the end of the episode that the Captain Freeman, is actually Ensign Mariner's mother, and she was talking, to subspace to Mariner's father, presumably her husband, who's an admiral. I hated that reveal. As I said, it reminded me of the Orville because the one aspect, if you saw my review about the Orville, the one aspect of the show I absolutely hate the most is that the captain, his first officer, is his ex-wife. I think that is so sitcomish and silly and dumb, and I just don't like it. And this reminded me a lot of that. The captain, our main character, one of the main characters, Lower Decks One ensigns, happens to be the daughter of the captain of the ship, and I'm just why do we need this? That makes it a bit sitcomish. I'm sorry to have that family dynamic, so I didn't like that. And also, like, I wasn't that big on the senior staff. I think they really need to sell me on these characters as well, because they're just, I mean, the way they play, especially how they had that one random guy when Ensign Tindy first came on board, and they showed this in the previous, the random guy was like, move along, lower decks. Like, having them be very, like, degrading to the junior officers, I think is very un-Starfleet-like. And it's not in the spirit of TNG, because even in the episode Lower Decks, like, they still have junior officers who aren't, they're not necessarily going to serve on the bridge or places of import, and they're not going to be privy to all the information, but they're not looked down upon and treated like shit by the senior officers. And so far it does seem, especially the way that Captain Freeman was treating Ensign Bulmer and kind of just using him as her personal spy to spy on her daughter, like, that doesn't portray her in a very positive light in the way that the first officer, I think is Ransom. I wonder if he's related to Captain Ransom. But anyway, how Commander Ransom and was just going on, hey, another great second contact, let's have a beer, haha. Like, he comes off like this huge asshole, and especially like he was sort of yelling at Ensign Bulmer. It's like, what the hell are you doing here, Ensign, and all that shit. Like, I really hope they don't continue that aspect of the senior staff just being assholes, because that doesn't really fit into Star Trek to me. Or even, like, forgetting the Star Trek aspect of it, it seems like too cliche, where, like, the senior staff or the those in command just look down on those stupid peons. Like, they can have a really interesting concept, just like the TNG episode Lower Decks did, of having this junior staff who aren't privy, who are doing the, cleaning the replicators or whatnot, but they don't have to be, like, treated like shit by the jocks or the preppy people, those in charge. That's an aspect of comedies I think is, not just Star Trek, but just any comedy that I think is really cliche and I really don't like. So I really hope they downplay that aspect of it. So I guess, and it did remind me a little bit of that show The Boys, where it was about a group of vigilantes who are hunting superheroes, but some of the superheroes were also the main characters, but the more focus was on the group of vigilantes, but the superheroes were also there. So it kind of it seems like a similar dynamic where our main cast is the Lower Decks, the ensigns, but it also the senior staff are kind of, to this show, what the Justice League ripoff, whatever they were called in The Boys, what they were to The Boys, where they're also main characters, but they're the ones that people in the universe focus on more, but they're not the main focus of the show. So I found that same dynamic, and as I said, that could work, but they need to develop these senior staff better. As is, I didn't really like how they portrayed them. So yeah, I think that's all I really have to say about this first episode. So, God, my rating for Second Contact out of 10, I'm really torn between a 7 and an 8, because I think, that stuff with them being nonchalant about the zombie stuff, that was really funny. But then again, the other stuff to the senior staff and the sucking on the spider wasn't all that great. I'm gonna give it a 7. Maybe I don't do 7.5s. If I did, I would do that, but I don't. So I'm gonna give it a 7. It's a high 7 though. Very good. Yeah, as I said, it it was very good at introducing the characters and setting up the dynamic and doing world building, and I think this show shows a lot of promise, but the episode itself was a bit too kinetic, too moving fast, too cramming, so I hope they sort of space out their episodes and slow down a bit more and give us more time to sit with these characters, because they said that Mike McMahon said that the whole point of his whole concept of this episode was to focus more on the character stories. So I hope they slow down a bit to do that. But I do really like, as I said, how they use this typical cliche Star Trek plot, but presented it in a totally different perspective where it's very nonchalant and people are just talking about how going on a date while people all around them were turning into zombies and going, rah! Like, that's effective comedy. So I did actually, even if I didn't laugh out loud, I did find that amusing. I did really like that. So anyway, that is it for my review of the first episode of Lower Decks. I shall be back next week and every week to review Lower Decks. Although next week, I gotta mention, I'll be visiting my family in Portland. So I'm going to be late with my review because I'm going to be camping over the weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and this episode comes out Thursday, so I probably won't be able to watch it. Even if I will, I definitely won't have time to do a review for it. So, because I fly out on Thursday morning. So, I probably won't get to do this review until Saturday. But yeah, I'll try to have this review for episode 2 out on Saturday. But after that, every episode will, every review will come out as the episode airs on Thursday. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. If you enjoyed this, be sure to check out my channel as I do many more Star Trek videos and many more reviews and other shows like The Expanse and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.